There are three things, I believe.
There's three, and I've tried to keep it to three. There's a whole bunch of like subtle little things which professionally my kind of viewpoint on these would potentially differ from other, high quality bike fitters, and that's okay. Little things, you can deal with them in lots of different ways, and the client will survive. They will still have a good experience. But there's three kind of big red flags that you want to be wary of if you're getting a high quality bike fit that's you charge many hundreds of dollars and you want to make sure that it's of decent quality. So that's not to say that if they do these three things it's definitely low quality, but if you have your suspicions about the quality of the session and you're still getting issues after it and they've done all of these things, the alarm bells ring fairly strongly. So the first one is pretty straightforward. If the bike fitter, there's lots of fitting systems out there which everyone uses. Lots of people are trained in these fit systems,
like the Retool.
Yeah, that's one of them. For example, if you go and see a fitter and they rely purely upon joint angle measurements for your position, be wary. Joint angles, and there's lots of them. They use often they will use motion capture infrared points on the main joint rotational centers, your elbows and your hips and your knees and this kind of stuff. And the software will capture a high quality, high frame rate motion pattern in a wireframe sense of the position. And then the general way this works is that the software says to the fitter, their knee extension angle is too low. So their knee is only opening between 25 degrees at the bottom of the stroke. Sorry, that's too high. Their knee extension angle is only opening 38 degrees, and it should be somewhere between 25 and 32 or something, whatever the range is. So the software will say move the seat up 6 millimeters or something like that, and the fitter goes, okay, we'll move your seat up 6. So what you're getting is the bike fitter is not looking at the rider with a high quality eye going, actually the reason that he's doing that is because he's towing the pedal really aggressively and he's not opening his knee angle really heavily. Maybe the cleat position's too far forward. So they're not looking at the whole picture. They're looking at a single metric of something like knee extension, and that's the easiest one for people to visualize. There's lots of other angles that they take, like the hip closure angle and all this kind of stuff. But speaking specifically about the knee extension angle, that can be varied by lots of other things, like the seat setback, for example. If you move the person's seat forward, their knee angle closes down, right? And so you can achieve the same knee angle as like by having the seat slammed all the way forward but really high. So let's say it's, I don't know, they're looking for 90 degrees to make it easy to visualize. You can achieve that by having the knee like this, so the seat is catastrophically far forward but the knee angle is still 90 degrees, right? Or you can have the seat way back and super low and it's still 90 degrees, right? So there's and they look at ankle measurements and ranges of motion and everything there. But if the fitter is just relying upon a certain range of measurement of something like a knee angle, you got to be worried. What you got to be looking for is the quality of the movement, not the quantity of the movement, and that's a much harder thing to visualize on something like a motion capture software system. They need to be using their eyes a lot. Yeah, it's okay if they use the tracking software to go, yes, look, your knee is deviating slightly across the line, and I can see that with this high quality machine that I've got. But if they rely solely upon that sort of stuff, it can be a problem. In addition, the actual, for example, the knee extension angle that one rider will need to be pain-free or to function properly can vary quite wildly. And so if you might have some footage of me riding on your trainer here that we filmed a while ago, my seat looks really low. And people go, gee mate, your seat's really low. You're not opening your knee angle right up. And at first glance, you would think that's quite logical. What you want to see is what I look like under load after 2 hours of riding. And then when I really start to drop my heels, my knee extension angle opens right up and it looks totally normal. In addition, if I raise my seat 5 millimeters from that point, I get knee pain in both knees. So where is my correct seat height? Well, it's the seat height where I'm the most stable, the most functional, and the least pain. And that just happens to look low to an untrained eye, right? So these sorts of things, other people will function with a seat that's much higher without any trouble at all. So then I'm way outside the angle measurements. Like if I've actually had angle-based fits done years and years ago, and my seat was like 5 centimeters too high.
Wow.
Yeah, based upon the angle recommendations,
Yes.
right, from the software. So anyone who follows those rules really blindly and doesn't use their eyes as well, you can use the software as a tool, but don't just follow it only rigidly.
Okay.
That's a red flag for me. The second one is the failure to conduct a really in-depth physical assessment off the bike. So there's lots of things that you can look for, and some things that are probably not that necessary to look for. Things like pelvic tilts, leg length discrepancies, general functional ability. How well does a person bend forwards? Are they asymmetrical? Is one of their quads twice the size of the other? Do they have less range of motion in one hip than the other? Is one of their sacroiliac joints jammed up? There's all these physical assessment things which, before we put the person on the bike, we spend 20, 30 minutes at least going over them. During the 2-hour session, I devote nearly a quarter of that time to looking at them off the bike,
Yes,
right?
I remember.
Yeah.
Watching me walk and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Watching you do the catwalk and looking for subtle symmetry issues. And it's only by looking at this stuff that you might get an idea that, hey, maybe Cam's got a slightly shorter right leg. If you don't do that stuff, and you see the rider and we go, oh, he's dropping his right hip and his right knee is tracking closer to the top tube, you will have no starting point of things to change in the position to try and solve the problem. So you need to go into it with by the time you stick them on the bike, you need to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things in the back of your mind, like, okay, I'm pretty sure he's got a slightly shorter left leg. I know he's got a foot size difference, and I know his first ray is a bit blocked up into extension on the right leg. And you need to have an idea of what may be causing the motion pattern that you're about to see, because your job is to resolve that problematic motion pattern, yeah? So you need to go into it with a whole bunch of possible working theories about why they may be pedaling the way that they're pedaling. And the only way of doing that is to assess them in detail before you stick them on the bike, right? So if the person sort of gets you in for the fit and you're there for 2 or 3 hours and they get you down to your knees and you bend around a bit and then they put the dots on and stick you on the machine, and be wary, they should be looking closely at your feet and talking to you about this foot being twisted along the long axis, and this femur looks like it's slightly shorter than that femur. This sort of in-depth physical assessment off the bike is a super critical.
Okay.
It's just, that's one of the reasons I don't do remote fittings. I get 5 emails a week from people in overseas, in Germany and in Tokyo, and I had a bloke from Tokyo. Yes. Anton, I'm talking to you if you're watching this. So I do get a lot of requests from international riders who've seen the videos, which is one of the great things about the global reach of YouTube.
Yes.
And they say, can you do a virtual fitting? And I say, no, there's 2 problems. One is that we can't assess you in detail off the bike. And the second one is that there's too much lost in terms of high-speed motion patterns via a footage link. It just can't be done well. And I'd rather not do it at all than do it poorly.
Yes.
Yeah. So they've got to be conducting an in-depth physical assessment off the bike. If they don't do that, again, alarm bells should be ringing.
Yes.
Number 3, this is a really common one that I see a lot: disregarding a known or a highly suspected structural leg length discrepancy as not significant. So I get a lot of people come in and they've got a one-sided knee pain or something, right? And they go, well, I've had four bike fits before. And I go, okay, so we've assessed you off the bike and we've determined that you've got a 4 millimeter shorter right tibia or a 6 millimeter shorter left femur or something like that. And this could and probably is part of the reason why one of your knees hurts, right? So did any of those bike fitters attempt to use a shim, like a leg length shim?
It's a shim?
Yeah. So this is a small shim stack that you've got under your speed plate cleat here.
Yes.
Did any of those bike fitters?
Never. For me, yes.
So you're a classic case, right?
Yes.
This is just, the reason I include this is because it's so common, it's disturbing, right? If they kind of assess you and they go, oh, I'm pretty sure you've got a shorter left leg or whatever, and they do nothing about it, or they go, well, it's so small, it's not affecting you. It always affects you. There is the odd freakishly high-level compensating rider where their compensation strategies for their shorter leg is so good that you don't need to do much about it. I've met a few of them. They're like 1 or 2 a year where they toe the pedal with their shorter leg, and if you intervene with a shim, it makes them look worse, right? And so you leave them because you don't want to worsen the symmetry. But they are incredibly rare. 99.9% of people, if they've got a leg length discrepancy of 2 or 3 millimeters,
yes,
you can, if you're looking closely enough, you can spot aberrant motion patterns from that when you watch them pedal. Just with my eyes, I can see it. If you're using something like a high quality motion tracking software, you'll definitely see it.
Yes.
So you'll see, one knee is opening at the bottom of the stroke a little bit more, and they're ankling slightly asymmetrically. So the person should know, they should have looked at you off the bike, point number 2, and gone, well, I think he's got a slightly shorter left leg. Let's see what happens if we put a 3 millimeter shim underneath his left foot. Let's just see what happens, see if his symmetry improves. So disregarding a structural leg length discrepancy, this, I don't know how this got into the bike fitting world, but I think it came from orthopedics. There's this, if you read a lot of orthopedic textbooks, they'll say that any leg length discrepancy of less than about half an inch, 12 millimeters or so, it will never cause a person a problem. That's sort of mostly true unless you're cycling. If you're pedaling, mate, your feet are locked in, the demand for symmetry is so high that even something like a 2 or 3 millimeter leg length discrepancy will cause visible motion pattern discrepancies between the two legs, right? And if you can't see them, that means you're not looking hard enough. Yeah. So if sort of 3/4, maybe up to 80% of my riders leave my clinic with a shim underneath one foot, and a lot of the time it's 2 or 3 millimeters, sometimes even 1 millimeter of shim, because they look slightly better with a 1 mil shim. This is the level of detail that you should expect from a 2 or 3 hour bike fit from a high quality professional, right? So the only reason I mention this one is I see it all the time. It's unbelievably common. And so as point number 3, if they disregard a leg length discrepancy or a suspected leg length discrepancy, and they never test you with a shim underneath either foot or any of that kind of stuff to see if your symmetry improves, alarm bells should be ringing.
Yeah, and I'm a prime example. 10 years of right-sided hip pain.
Yeah.
Since I've had that shim, hip pain's gone.
Yeah, it's just unbelievably common, which is the main reason I put it in there. Is it happens so frequently, and from high quality, from expensive bike fitters as well as cheap ones, you just see it all the time. I think a lot of people, they put leg length discrepancies in the too hard basket. They're like, well, it's too difficult. We won't teach the fitter how to check for it, and it can be hard to check for, but it's easy to test. You just put a shim underneath their right foot, and if they look worse, put it under their left foot. If you have no idea if they've got a leg length discrepancy, for example, because they're very hard to assess for whatever reason, just try it under the right and the left foot and see if they look better or worse. If you put a shim under their longer leg, their symmetry will worsen, right? Because it exacerbates the leg length discrepancy. If you put it under their shorter leg and they look better, you go, maybe they've got a leg length discrepancy. They should be thinking about these things.
Yes.
Yeah, not necessarily just blindly using shims for every symmetry-based issue, but at least checking for it.
Cool.
Yeah.